Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Siegel?
Whatever you want, Congressman. I'm good. Thank you.
Siegel?
Sigilly.
Sigilly. All right, start with you. I think you would well know that I was just reviewing Joint Pub 3.0, Joint Operations, a foundation of joint operations in the military, and nowhere in there does it call for diversity of command. It does call for unity of command, and it talks a lot about unit morale and the need for unity within our military units. You testified earlier that you haven't seen Marxism, critical race theory. You don't know where it is in the military or where it is at West Point. Is that accurate characterization?
I had not heard of it when I was at West Point, teaching there for 2 decades. I had not heard of it until it became a national issue.
When did you leave West Point?
I stopped teaching there in 2019.
Okay. So you're unaware then that Critical Race Theory 101 is part of the West Point curriculum? According to, and I'd like to enter into the record,
I'm not quite sure what, you're saying that there's a department of critical race theory?
No, there is it's part of the syllabus, excuse me.
The part of the syllabus for what, Congressman?
For one of the classes at West Point.
Well, no, I think that that's absolutely true, that for one class, for one elective, it certainly could be.
Do you agree with the lecture, Understanding Your Whiteness and White Rage, taught by Dr. Carol Anderson of Emory University, that should be taught at West Point?
I'm not familiar with that lecture.
The
thing
essentially, the theme is that white people are enraged, not 100 years ago, not 40 years ago, which you're talking about, the 60s and 70s. Today, white cadets, white people are enraged by black advancement.
Well, I think, Congressman, the great thing about education is that you can get a variety of different perspectives.
Sure.
It's not training, which is what some of my colleagues have talked about. I'm talking about education. You want to hear the broadest representation of every viewpoint.
Do you understand?
You can hear that.
I know this is the very clever approach of the left to conflate history with current day training. So would you agree that critical race theory is a foundation for DEI?
No, I would not. I don't know that to be true. DEI, it goes back to equal opportunity. In the early part of the 1970s, it's still just a part of what equal opportunity, I would say.
What's the difference in equity and equality? Equal opportunity, which is, so right now, the Director of National Intelligence, how infused this ideology has become across our national security apparatus, the Director of National Intelligence has an Office for Equal Opportunity, which, for the record, I fully agree with. I want every American, race, religion, socioeconomic background, to have an equal opportunity to serve. They also have an Office of DEI, including equity. What's the difference in equity?
Well, I would say that when this started, as a historian, it started as a Defense Race Relation Institute and then became the Defense Equal Opportunity.
What's the difference in equity and equality? Equal opportunity to serve and equity, which is an equal outcome for all.
I would again say that the equal opportunity, which at least at West Point, when I was there and started the DEI program,
equal opportunity.
But the equal opportunity program falls under the DEI at West Point.
What's equity?
I don't know what, Congressman. If
you're here as an expert today, the Democratic witness. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of there's a DEI office in the Pentagon, a chief DEI office.
There's DEI in many
and
of
you don't know what equity. You can't testify to what equity means? Well, I'll tell you, since you don't know.
Thank you, Congressman.
It is equal outcomes for all, which is a hallmark of Marxism. DEI is Marxist-based, as is critical race theory, but let's progress, since, I mean, apparently the expert doesn't know what equity is in DEI. I have here, I'd like to enter for the record, a class composition with racial goals for West Point. You just testified, you were under oath, you were in the admissions office.
I was there. I wasn't in the admissions office. I was on the admissions committee for 1 year, and I know that there were no quotas, is what I said, Congressman.
So we're going to parse over quotas and goals. This is from the superintendent, and here's the goals, and it has African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, women, with percentages. We have red here for when they missed those goals. That's
As I said, Congressman,
That's
there
an
are
issue.
no quotas on when I was on the admissions committee, there were no
Let's
quotas.
also
There is
enter into
also,
the record-
Congressman, the ability to have athletes on there. So there are many other goals on there, as I'm sure you've seen, on what are the other. And if you could go read all of those goals, it would tell you how deep that is. And in fact,
Here's
one of
the
the
problem.
largest number of people that are recruited at West Point are athletes, 25%.
Here's the problem. When you have any elite institution, when you say, and your directive is to advance one group based on the skin color, you have to take those slots from another group based on their skin color.
And
it's
Congressman,
a zero sum.
But the largest of those groups is the athletes.
It's a zero sum. Oh, well, the athletes get broken down by their skin color.
And
In this chart.
25%.
In this chart that
of
you
those.
just said doesn't exist, but let's continue. This is my time. Here, just to go House system-wide, Mr. Chairman, here's a memorandum from the Secretary of the Air Force with white, black, Asian, American Indian. I mean, I think my wife, who's an Army veteran, who is Arab, she didn't have a place, I guess, in this chart. My son, who's now multiracial, I don't know if he would have a, probably looks white to most people. I don't know that he would have a place. But here, you have current percentages and a mandate to increase those percentages. You have to then take those slots, whether they're pilot slots or whatever, from someone else based on ethnicity. This is signed by the now chairman of the Joint Chiefs, C.Q. Brown, signed by the Secretary of the Air Force with a mandate, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. With a mandate, you are directed to develop. Mr. Chairman, would you mind yielding?
I'll yield him all of my time. I'll yield him all of my
Mr.
time.
Chairman, if it's okay if I could have
That's
the
okay.
record.
Well,
I just want to get this on the record because I think we've had some very misleading testimony today. With the mandate, you are directed to develop a DEI plan within 30 days and report back annually based on percentages. This is illegal, it's wrong, and it's divisive. Finally, I just want to ask as a matter, here are some of the key proponents of CRT, which basically says to be less white is to be less racially oppressive. To be white, no member of society is innocent. What these authors say is that if you're white, you are incapable of not being racist. That in and of itself is racist, sir. And by the way, these were lecturers at the Air Force Academy. That is divisive, and it's wrong, and it's destructive. And finally, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. We have data that shows, as Mr. Lohmeyer has testified to, 62% of active duty military members are seeing a politicized military. 65% will recommend their child not join, and now we're in a recruiting crisis. This is why these hearings are so necessary. And you are right, Mr. Siegel, in that Congress drives change. This Congress has banned critical race theory in the military in this defense bill. We have eliminated the hiring of divisive DEI bureaucrats. We are going to drive this change to get our military back to a meritocracy with equal opportunity for all. You cannot fight racism with more racism, and you have to have data. Final question, Mr. Chairman. Do you, General Siegel, have any data that shows that a more or less diverse submarine bomber brigade is more lethal or less lethal? Let's go with the submarine crew.
Congressman, I know that a submarine's lethality comes with its nuclear weapons. We have the most lethal.
No, I'm talking about the crew. You have to have people to operate it.
Right, and I would go back to my area of expertise, which is in the early 1970s, when we did not have that lethality then. And, and the reason that we didn't have that lethality then is because we did not have policies that allowed us to have that.
We're now 50 years beyond that.
And the reason that we're so good is we've had those policies. Those policies have made us as successful as we are right now.
By percentage, a more or less, let's say bomber crew, let's say brigade, whether it's 50% black, 10% black, 30% Jewish, any of these societal factors, data that drives readiness.
I would say that the only way we can have an equal force that is ready and able is to recruit that force. And if we can't recruit that force from the entire country and have leadership that reflects that, then we are not going to be a successful military. But we are a successful military in part because some of these policies allow us to recruit and retain the greatest Americans in the country.
I'll take that for the record that there is no actual data. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you much. I guess we have a couple minutes for Mr. Comer left.
I have 2 more minutes if you want to. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Take it, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. You're the expert. Go ahead.
Let's go with, just for the record, with General Burt here and how politicization is infusing our military. This is General Burt from your service, Mr. Lohmeyer, and I'd like you to comment on this, who stated publicly at a forum that she is compelled to consider different candidates who are perhaps less qualified if they disagree with state law. Can you talk about the implications of civilian oversight of the military if we have a 3-star general, active duty, in front of a large crowd, live streamed, talking about sending less qualified people to certain states because of their state laws? And should the military now be able to opine? For example, this is the Pandora's box that is being opened, that if maybe I don't like the Second Amendment laws or the gun restriction laws in a certain location, that I should now be able to self-select with the military to go to a different place?
Thank you, Congressman. One of the points that General Sigilly made earlier was that he was unaware of the many hundreds of senior military leaders ever saying anything aught of Senator Tuberville's hold on confirmations. And I suppose, generally speaking, that's fair enough, but during that same time period is when General Deanna Burt made the comments you're referring to, and it was overtly political. And I'll tell you from my own experience while in the Space Force is that the entire time I was there, this is one of the respected leaders in the Space Force to whom people looked, trusted as a warfighter because she was talented as a warfighter, but the moment you make a statement like that, you lose trust, confidence of the vast majority of people under your command.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.